So my first step on the other page is to get it equal to 0. This equation is already equal to 0, so I can move on to step 2. Step 2 is to identify my ABCs. So A equals 2, B equals 5, and C equals -7. My next step is to sing the song and write my numbers as we go. So x equals opposite b, so that means -5, plus or minus square root b squared, so 5, minus 4, a is 2, c is -7, all over 2a. What's really important is that all over 2a. So a lot of people like to leave off part of this fraction bar, but the whole thing is important. My next step is going to be to focus on what is underneath the radical. So I'm going to write everything else. 2 times 2 is 4. And we're going to use our calculator to find what's under the radical. But make sure you put parentheses around your b that I'm squaring, because a negative number squared is positive. But if you forget to put parentheses, your calculator is going to tell you it's a negative. So we're going to type everything in the radical, but not the square root, into our calculator. So parentheses 5, close your parentheses, squared, minus 4 times 2 times -7. When I simplify this whole thing under the square root, it all comes down to being 81. Now, my next step, according to the steps on the front, is to simplify my radical if I can. Well, this is a nice one because it's a perfect square. So what is the square root of 81? The square root of 81 is 9. So I'm going to simplify that whole thing down to 9. Notice there's no more square root because I simplified that square root and it's a perfect square. Now I have a plus and a minus. For this next step, we're going to split this up. So x equals -5 plus 9 over 4, comma, x equals -5 minus 9 over 4. And we're going to go a little bit more from there. So we simplify our numerator first. -5 plus 9 would give me 4 over 4. -5 minus 9 is -14 over 4. And now we simplify those fractions. 4 over 4 is 1. And then both of these are divisible by 2, so -7 over 2. So those are my two solutions. In this next problem, you'll notice I am not equal to 0. So the first thing I'm going to do is get this equation equal to 0, and I'm going to do that by moving everything to the left side because I want my x squared term to be happy, aka I want it to be positive. And this needs to be a +1. Watch your signs when you are moving stuff around. It's easy to make a mistake like that. So a is 1, b is -3, and c is +1. So now we sing our song and plug stuff in. X equals opposite b, which will make it positive, plus or minus square root b squared, in parentheses, minus 4ac, all over 2a. Now we clean up the denominator, so 2 times 1 would be 2, square root, and we're going to type all of this stuff underneath here into our calculator. This one isn't too hard to do in your head. It's going to be 9 minus 4, which is 5. But remember, your calculator's silly, so make sure you put the -3 in parentheses if you're using your calculator. Now, my next step would be to simplify my radical. But is there anything to simplify with square root of 5? Nope. So guess what? My final answer is 3 plus or minus the square root of 5 over 2. In this next problem, we're already equal to 0, so step 1 is done. Step 2 is identify ABCs. A is 1, B is -6, C is 11. So sing your song. X equals opposite b, +6, plus or minus square root b squared, in parentheses, minus 4ac, all over 2a. All right, let's clean it up. 6 plus or minus the square root of something over 2 times 1 is 2. And then we're going to type all of this into the calculator, making sure to use parentheses. And 36 minus 44 is going to give me -8. Now we finally get to do our next step. All right, so we want to do our simplification of our root. So we want to simplify the square root of negative 8. So the first thing we talked about doing is I need to take out that square root of a negative, so we need to make that an I. We're going to factor tree it, so that's 4 times 2. 2 times 2, bring down that 2. And I have a pair of 2, so that will be 2. Who's left at home? Square root of 2. Don't forget that I we took out way at the beginning. Alright, so I'm going to write what I had besides my square root, which was 6 plus or minus something over 2. And now that something, we've simplified our square root, is 2 square root of 2i. So now we get to talk about how to simplify from here. So from here, what we do is we look at everything outside the square root. So what do I have outside the square root? I have a 6, I have a 2, and I have a 2. Is there anything that divides into all of those numbers? Yes, we can divide all of those numbers by 2. So if I divide 6 by 2, I get 3. Then I have my plus or minus. 2 divided by 2 is 1, which I don't have to write, but I'm going to write here for a second. Square root of 2i, that stays, so notice I'm not dividing under the square root. Divided by 2 divided by 2 is 1. So do I really need that divided by 1? No. So I can erase that if I want. But it's correct if I leave it. So you're more than welcome to just leave it. And here is my final answer. Last one. So we're already equal to 0. Let's move on to step 2. A is 9, B is 12, and C is negative 5. Sing your song. X equals opposite B, plus or minus square root, B squared minus 4AC, all over 2A. All right, so X equals negative 12 plus or minus the square root of something over 18. So what is that something? We definitely want to use a calculator on this one. We're going to type all of that in. Okay, make sure that you have parentheses around the B, although it's not going to make a difference. Make sure that this is a minus and this is a negative, because your calculator is silly. So when I do that, I get 324. Now, I don't have that one memorized, but I'm just going to check to see if it is a perfect square. So if I do the square root of that, hey, look, it actually is a perfect square, and that would be 18. So the square root of 324 is 18. Now we have where the square root is gone away, so we're going to split these up into our plus and minus. So negative 12 plus 18 over 18, and negative 12 minus 18 over 18. Now we're going to simplify our numerators. So negative 12 plus 18 gives me 6. Leave it over the 18. Negative 12 minus 18 is negative 30. Leave it over 18. And both of these fractions, everything's divisible by 6. So I'm going to divide everything by 6. That will give me 1/3 and negative 5 over 3, not 6.